Yay! It's time for blended learning with Google. This is going to be so jam-packed, y'all. You may be drinking from the fire hose, but I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you are inspired by the ideas from my latest book, Blended Learning with Google. So let's get started. So here is a link to the slides. Of course, if you're watching this video, you have the direct link to click on below the video, so you don't have to worry about typing this in. These links aren't going anywhere, but I wanted you to have access to follow along in the slides. Click on any links that are in the slides, and we will try to make sure you have as many resources as you need. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Kasey. I am the founder of Shake Up Learning. You can find me across social media pretty much as Shake Up Learning everywhere. So if you are following along in the slides, you can click on any of those social links and connect with me there. I would love to connect and learn with you. I also have a few Google certifications, and I say that not to brag, but to let you know that I do spend a lot of time keeping up with Google. And if you have any questions about Google certification, I have tons of resources for that as well. So let's get started with the main event here, blended learning with Google. So these ideas come from my latest book, Blended Learning with Google. There is also a supplement, if you're interested, called Google from A to Z, which is really just a glossary of Google tools just to help you understand all of the things that are out there. It goes far beyond just what is in Google Drive. So let's get started at the heart of everything that we do. It is about the learning. It's not about Google, y'all. It is about the learning. So if you have a copy of this book, or you pick up a copy of this book, or you read anything that I do, you know that my main goal is always to reach the learning goal, that it's not about the tools. As much as I get distracted by fun technology, because I am the techie girl, that is not at all what this is about. If you want to take a deeper dive into some of these ideas, I have a podcast series that came out when the book came out. It's 3 parts, and these are things that we won't get a chance to cover in today's session, but you can always go check that out and listen to the Shake Up Learning Show to learn more. And of course, if you're following along, again, all of those links are clickable on the slides. So let's talk about this idea of how to move from static teaching to dynamic blended learning. And I do use those words very purposefully. So static teaching was very much characteristic of what my classroom looked like for my first few years of teaching. It was very old school, traditional, lecture style, teacher in front of the room, and I didn't know any better. I taught the way I was taught. But over the years, I have learned many new things, many new strategies, and we have so many tools at our disposal to make the learning dynamic and really to shift from the focus of teaching to actual learning, right? Learning is our goal. So let me give you my definition for dynamic blended learning. Bear with me, it's a bit long, but this definition is evolving over time. It has evolved since the first book, and I just want you to wrap your head around what we are talking about today. Dynamic blended learning is characterized by constant change in activity, growing and evolving over time. This learning can take place anywhere, anytime, and it's personalized and differentiated. It is learner-centered, giving students choice and embedding communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity skills where they align with the learning goals. Dynamic blended learning also extends beyond the traditional bounds of the school day, schedule, and physical walls, and beyond the physical notion of hard and fast due dates. Digital tools are used for more than substitution, to do and create previously unconceived of things. Dynamic learning is boundless with limitless opportunities. So when you think of dynamic learning, I want you to think of it as blended learning on steroids. It's not just blending things, it's blending things with purpose. Static learning, on the other side, is learning that lacks movement, action, or change. And with this unengaging model, learning happens in short bursts. It's often demonstrated through one and done activities, short-term assignments, or worksheets, even digital worksheets, which are confined within the traditional bounds of the school system, school day, and the school walls. So why do we put so many limitations on learning? Our students deserve so much more than static one and done. That was what my classroom looked like. Do this packet, read this article, answer this worksheet, fill this out. I never was connecting the dots, and I definitely wasn't using every strategy and tool at my disposal to engage students and to help them learn how everything is connected and how it works together and how we can create better learning experiences for our students. So what in the world does all of this have to do with Google? Well, Google offers educators and students many tools that support these principles. It's kind of a no-brainer. The purpose of using technology in any form in the classroom is to support this idea of dynamic blended learning. And digital tools such as Google for Education present us with a unique opportunity to do things differently, to engage students in new ways, and to inspire them to explore and create. So this is my dynamic learning model. Of course, at the center is learning. Like I said, that is our target. Around dynamic learning, you see the gray circle. Those are the 4 C's. And every time I visit a classroom, or think of anything in my own classroom that I would repeat, that needs to be done, that is so engaging and exciting and gets kids really into the learning, involves one or more of the 4 C's. And for me, those are just foundational part of everything that we should be focusing on in the 21st century. Now, around the 4 C's, you will see these color-coded icons. These are the characteristics of dynamic learning, and we're going to break those down in just a second. Now, that outer ring, that is really the lesson planning cycle. From purposeful planning, focused on learning outcomes, fearless implementation, facilitated with finesse, honest reflection, and sharing with the world. Now take this model and plant that right in the middle of the framework, and that's where we're going to break down these characteristics. The dynamic learning characteristics are beyond the bell, beyond the grade level and subject area, beyond the walls, beyond the tools, and beyond the due date. So when you think of this word dynamic, I want you to associate it with beyond, with pushing boundaries. So when I was putting this framework together, when I was writing my first book, everything that I kept thinking about was really about breaking down traditional boundaries that we have in the classroom. Some of these boundaries are things that we think are boundaries because it's just always been done that way. And there are some things that are created boundaries. Sometimes it's a mindset issue, and we have to work through that. So let's go through these. Dynamic blended learning strategies. Now, what I'm going to do is give you some flow to what we're going to cover today. So we are going to talk about the characteristic. I'm going to give you a strategy to help you meet that characteristic. And then I'm going to give you the Google tools that will best reach that characteristic and strategy. So we always start with the learning goal. We don't ever start with Google tools. If you came and asked me, Kasey, I love Google Drawings. What in the world do I do with this in my classroom? My next question is, what are you teaching? What are your learning goals? That is where we always start. So we're going to break this down and really associate the characteristics with some strategies, and then look at how these tools can help us address these in the classroom. Beyond the bell. So this is our first characteristic. I almost wish I had named this something else because I feel like I have misled people. When you see the word bell, you tend to think, that means homework. That's something that happens after the bell rings. No, I want you to think as beyond the bell is a mindset, because learning doesn't have to end when the bell rings or whatever signals the end of the school day. I know for a lot of my students, that really was how they viewed school. It was like work. And they were really excited when the bell would ring because the work day was over. We're really thinking about learning as something that students can do anywhere, anytime. It shouldn't have to be associated with school. And students can own learning. If they are riding the bus home from school and they are on YouTube looking up a Minecraft trick, that's learning. And I want kids to recognize that. So let's go with our first strategy here. This is a tracker. And I'm going to show you what trackers look like. Got this idea from Lisa Johnson, Tech Chef for You, who is also presenting at this conference. And so you can use trackers to track all kinds of things, track emotions, habits, reading, or any kind of task or progress over time. Now, the two tools that I think meet this need the best are Google Sheets and Google Forms. I always tell people I think of Forms and Sheets as like this married couple because they just work so well together. So here is one of Lisa's trackers. This is a student reflection tracker, but it also has some goal setting and really all kinds of different things that students can reflect on. So tracking can help our students not only reach their goals, but establish good habits and emotional control. And SEL trackers offer students a way to recognize emotions and social cues as well as show growth over time. And so this is a Google Sheet, and it's a great place to do this. It's a great way to feed that information and to come back to it. So you see in Lisa's example here, they're looking and kind of rating how they're doing in multiple areas of both personal and academic life. You know, what are the goals? What do I need to do more of? What do I need to do less of? And in fact, this might be handy for a lot of you watching this, you know, looking at this. And you can go find Lisa's templates in a post that she shared on the Shake Up Learning blog that's linked below, 6 free Google templates for creative productivity. And you can go make a copy of it, edit it, and make it work for you and your students. Now, of course, you can track all kinds of things. The idea of just tracking your reading, you know, that was something I did a lot as a language arts teacher. My students needed to track what they were reading, their page numbers. We had to have responses after each reading session, and all of that can be there. So there are lots of different ways to use this idea of trackers. But this particular one really ties back to that beyond the bell mindset because we are talking about goals and we're going to get even further into goals in just a second. So our next strategy is actual goal setting, which is a research-based strategy to help students or anyone set measurable academic and personal goals. So I do goal setting. I know many adults who do this, and it just occurred to me, why don't we have more students doing this? Now, some Google tools that work well for tracking your goals: Google Keep, Google Sheets, and Google Docs if you want to go simple. So here is a little screenshot for you from Google Keep. If you've never used Google Keep, go to keep.google.com. It's like a little to-do list and note manager. Kind of looks like a bunch of sticky notes on a web page. And you can customize it. You can add images. You can create lists. You can create notes. You can do all kinds of things. So this idea of goal setting is something that is really empowering for students. In fact, it happens to be an ISTE standard under the Empower strand. So we can list out our goals, but you know what? You don't just do it once. You come back to it. You have to follow up and think about your goals and come back to them to see, are you reaching that goal? Have you hit a milestone? Have you actually forgotten about it? And you can help your students to set their own goals. I would recommend that you have them set goals for your classroom as well as personal learning goals. So that lets you know who they are. That helps you build a relationship with that student and understand some of the things that they may be interested in. Now, with the littles, maybe you don't need a fancy tracker or Google Keep. You could even just make it a conversation. You know, what are 3 things that would make today great? Or what's one thing that would make today great? Now, with the older kids, especially like my middle schoolers, I would encourage you to keep them from making grade-focused goals, because I can hear my students now, Ms. Bell, I want to make an A. Okay, well, what does that look like? Because grades don't necessarily equal learning, so let's talk about the learning. What do you have to know and be able to do to get an A in my class, and to really nail that down? So another goal-setting strategy that is a visual strategy is called vision boards. And this is visual goal setting where you pretty much create a collage of images, words, or anything else you want that represents your goals. And this is something that I do pretty much every year, and I go old school with it. I've got my foam board and my washi tape and magazines and all kinds of stuff, and it gets kind of crafty, but it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it can be completely digital, and Google Slides and drawings are perfect for that. Jamboard is too, but I really like slides and drawings as my top choices. So with slides, I feel like it has the edge, and if you click on the link here, this is an entire blog post explaining this idea of student-created vision boards. I give slides the edge on this because of the ability to use add-ons. And there's some great add-ons for Google Slides, including Unsplash. So Unsplash will give you access to high-resolution photography. It's copyright-friendly. Icons by Noun Project can give you icons as well, but there's tons of other things in there. But you can layer those images and create this digital collage as your vision board, and students can come back to this. Now, this was an idea I shared many years ago. If you go to this blog post, you'll probably see in the comments different versions that teachers have done over the years, and really how they've even leveled it up. Some have had students use Screencastify to record a reflection and talk about their goals. So adding that element to it, you can make this where students even share these with other students, or they can keep them kind of personal. Kind of depends on how you use it in your classroom. Our next characteristic is beyond the grade level and subject area. So we have to think of learning as something that is so much more flexible than our prescribed curriculum. There is a reason why we have curriculum, but sometimes as teachers and as students, we feel like this is it, no more, no less. But we really want students to be exposed to new ideas and interests so that when they leave our doors, they aren't completely confused about what they're really interested in. And you know what? Over the last 2 years, we've seen firsthand how flexible teachers and students have had to be with distance learning. So what we're seeing and experiencing in this COVID world is that the factory model doesn't work well for today's culture. We tried to take, some schools tried to take their traditional model of instruction and assessment and suddenly do it in an online environment, and it didn't work that way. It's because we have to think differently. And it can actually be way more ineffective for personalized and distance learning. So really pushing the boundaries and finding the wiggle room is what this is about. This is not about teaching extra stuff. So don't look at me and say, Kasey, I can't teach one more thing. Stay with me. I'm going to give you some strategies. So my favorite strategy for going beyond here is choice boards, or just giving students choice in general will help you find that wiggle room and give students some options to select their own topics and reading and activities and projects. But if you haven't used a choice board before, they could also be called learning menus. It's just a set of activities from which students can choose. Okay, make your choices. And it can be short, it can be long, it can be complicated, it can be a 20-minute activity, it can be a 6-week project. The list goes on and on and on. And the tools that we can use really can go on and on and on. One, because we can talk about the tools to create the choice board, and then we can talk about the tools that students can use to create whatever activities that they have selected from the choice board as well. So these are a couple examples. I have tons of examples, y'all. I've been talking about choice boards for years, and I've given you a couple of resources here. In fact, I did a podcast episode a few weeks ago, another follow-up on choice boards that is available if you listen to the Shake Up Learning show. So you see the tic-tac-toe on one side, and then you see something a little more creative. So let's talk about the tic-tac-toe briefly. If you want to dig deep into the lesson design and everything else, you definitely want to check out the Teacher's Guide to Digital Choice Boards, and I will break that down. I also talk a lot about choice boards in my books. But with the tic-tac-toe, that was my first foray into choice in the classroom, and I still think the tic-tac-toe is my absolute favorite because it is so flexible. So you can create these, again, for short activities, for long projects, and you fill in the blanks. You know, I kind of have my own strategies, like I said, that you can go into, but with this color coding, essentially students are choosing one blue and one yellow, and everybody has to do the middle square. That helps me find that balance so that students aren't just trying to find the easy, shortest activity to do. By the way, if you click on any of these, they will take you to the blog post with more information on how you can get that and make a copy of that template. This template right here, the Fortnite template, is from my buddy Tommy Spall in Brenham ISD. And Tommy created this awesome menu just with the Fortnite map. And he has, you can see the color coding icons or circles on here where you can drop on the map. And these are all different types of tools or teacher-led activities. And his template is also very generic so that you can adapt it to your content area. Another way to go beyond the grade and subject area is project-based learning. And there are a lot of different versions of project-based learning, but most of the time they do involve some student choice. So students are solving real-world problems, and they're learning more through the process than the actual product that they end up with. So true project-based learning usually engages them in solving a real-world problem or answering a complex question. And it's such a big project that takes place over an extended period of time that there are many tools that can support this. Of course, Google search, docs, forms, sheets, Keep, calendar for, keeping track of your due dates and your milestones. You can take pictures and save them in Google Photos, create your presentation in Google Slides. You can even create a Google site about your whole project. Lots of ways to use Google tools to support this idea. Let's move on to our next characteristic, beyond the walls. Now, this one had a whole different meaning during lockdown. I've been talking about going beyond the walls for many years now, and a lot of teachers were kind of reluctant to take the steps, but I feel like we have broken down a lot of those barriers because we had to during lockdown and remote learning. So I want you to think of the wall as two-sided. We're both bringing the world into our classrooms to connect with our students, and we're bringing our students and their work to the outside world. So I am a firm believer that every student in every grade should have opportunities to connect and learn globally, as well as publish their work online for a global audience. And remote learning became essential that, breaking down the walls went from something, oh yeah, that was like extra or nice to have, to something we needed to have. But there are a lot of different ways to approach this. One thing that I am a huge proponent of is publishing student work online for an outside audience. And I know many of you have probably heard my story, but here's the short version. I gave my students an opportunity to publish their writing online, and as soon as they got a comment from someone else, they all raised their hands and asked if they could revise it because they didn't know anyone was going to read it besides me. So when you give them an audience that they care about, they will give you better quality work. And these were my pre-AP kids. They were telling me they could give me better work if I gave them a better audience. So just let that sink in for a moment. So we can give students an outside audience for their work, but what really supercharges it is giving them an option to leave feedback from that audience. So having a comment feature is huge. Some way for them to communicate, and then students actually know that somebody is taking the time to look at what they have done or created. So Google Sites is a great place for this. Google Sites makes it easy to create a website and publish things online. Blogger is great, but it's 13 and over. Of course, you can go simple with Google Slides or Docs or YouTube. Keep in mind, just because you make something public doesn't mean anyone's going to find it. So you also have to keep that in your strategy of how you're going to get other eyes on your students' work, or maybe those intentional eyes. Maybe you're reaching out to certain groups of people who might be experts in whatever topic students are studying or something like that. So I wrote about this in my first book, and I had so many questions. I really kind of broke it down into some baby steps in the second book, in Blended Learning with Google. And you can start small. Down at the bottom, you see share with a classroom on the same campus. If you've never had students sharing outside, then that's the first step. Or share with a classroom on another campus in your district or region. Move up to sharing with another state, another country, and then really honing in on that authentic audience, an expert or an author, or sharing globally and publicly, and making sure that there's some intention and purpose to this. It's not just about having random people find and leave a comment. We want the right people to do this. So you have to really think intentionally about this idea. Now, the other side of this is making those global connections and bringing the outside world in. So we can give students the ability to connect and learn globally. They can connect with authors, experts, organizations, and other classrooms. Now, we see firsthand now how easy this is. It wasn't that long ago that it took a lot of fancy equipment to make these types of connections, to connect. We had what we called like our distance learning room, and it had all this expensive equipment that was really hard to manage, and you had to have some expert in the room who could run it, and it was hard to, sign up for times, and it was just a headache. But now any device that has a camera and an internet connection can do this. So Google Meet is an obvious Google tool, of course, if you're using Zoom or something else. YouTube Live, Google Slides, Google Docs can even be that way if you want to invite someone to collaborate or to use the comments and chat feature. This is a picture of what I call a mystery connection. So no matter what you're studying in your classroom, there's probably an outside connection that you can make to enrich the experience. And this particular one is something that many teachers have been doing for years. It has also been called a mystery Skype or mystery Hangout. When Google changed from Hangouts to Meet, I decided I'm not calling this mystery Meet. That just is not happening. So I'm just calling it a mystery connection. And in this picture are two classrooms that are connecting, but they don't know where the other classroom is located. So they have to ask questions, use context clues to figure it out. So you can see even just by the back of the heads in this classroom that every kid looks pretty much engaged. And this can be really fun. Now, this is an activity for younger students, but there's so many ways that we can connect. One thing that I naturally think of as a language arts teacher is authors, bringing in authors. And you can do that virtually. It doesn't cost anything. There are no yellow buses. There are no field trips involved. And how much stickier is the learning when they get to speak to the author, or when they get to speak to a survivor of a war? Do they better understand the historical war that maybe you're talking about in your history class? There's so many ways that these connections can really bring the learning to life and help students better understand your content. Now, our next characteristic is beyond the tools. This one is the largest chapter in Blended Learning with Google. There are tons of ways to go beyond the tools. And what this is talking about is using digital tools to do new things. Replicating face-to-face activities in an online environment is much easier said than done. And a lot of teachers experience this when they were forced to go remote and online. And it's like fitting a square peg in a round hole. You have to think differently. So we have to rethink how we use technology and move beyond just the substitution level. How many times have I been asked, how do I put a worksheet in Google Classroom? Well, that's not the right question to ask. If you're doing this, are you actually creating something that is more difficult? And is there something new that you could do that you previously couldn't do on a paper worksheet? So we want to use digital tools for new kinds of teaching and to promote deeper learning. And I like to keep things simple. I know there are a lot of great models out there, TPAC and SAMR, but I like to think of this as just like a continuum. And on one side, we have using digital tools to do old things, and on the other side, we have using digital tools to do new things. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of room for substitution. That doesn't mean that everything has to be on the far end. Everything doesn't have to be on this innovative end of what we're doing. There is room for all kinds of activities that still help us reach our learning goals. And this is one of my favorite strategies. In fact, I could have probably done an entire session on the idea of storytelling. And we all have stories to tell. Every grade, every subject area, students tell or retell stories. And these can be written or visual about content and learning. They can create ebooks, photo stories, comic strips, interactive timelines, stop motion animation. The list goes on and on and on. And so do the tools. Some natural ones that come to mind, Google Slides. If you listen to me, you know how much I love Google Slides. I call it the Swiss Army knife of G Suite because it does so many things, and especially for its creation abilities. Google Drawings, very much a similar tool to Slides. I always say Drawings is like one big canvas and Slides is like a deck of canvases. So it just kind of depends on your purpose. Google Photos, Google Docs, and even Google Earth. You can tell a story in Google Earth. If you didn't know this, you can mark places on Earth. You can travel. You can add text. You can add video. You can add links. You can make a completely interactive tour inside Google Earth. So I do love comic strips. This was something that I did in my classroom and I learned a lot of great lessons, but try storytelling through comic strips and you can do this easily in Google Slides or Drawings. This example is from my friend Sylvia Duckworth, and all you need is some images and drop those into some squares and a colored background and you got it. That's it. I will kind of warn you with comic strips to be careful of the content that you're using because it can easily change the tone and mood and even the genre of what you're talking about. So you don't want to hit a sensitive subject and then create a comic strip about it. But this is really easy to do. In fact, with the littles, you may want to use a template with them and you can easily create this. This is just a background with some white boxes and I added some call outs. Those are just found under the shapes in Google Slides. Super easy. The older kids should be able to do it themselves and to be able to decide, is this going to be 5 squares or 6 squares? But there is also some beauty in the limitation of comic strips, right? We don't want this one to go on for 50 slides and have, 50 times however many squares we have. That's too long. So students have to be concise. They have to learn how to summarize. And in fact, a lot of times it requires some critical thinking skills to break that story down into something more simplistic that goes into a comic strip. Another thing that I love to do is to create ebooks in Google Slides. I do this a lot with the resources I share on Shake Up Learning. So for instance, the Google Classroom cheat sheets that I created were all made in Google Slides. You can see right there the screenshot. I changed the size and orientation, and it allows me to layer images like the screenshots and everything in there and make that a little bit more friendly than something created in Docs. Now, for students, this could be a picture book, this could be an ABC book, this can be a full-blown novel, this could be collaborative, it can be individual. There are so many ways that you can create an ebook. Mike Muhammad, who was on the Shake Up Learning Show a few months ago, shared an idea where he had his students creating ebooks and slides, his high school physics students, and they were teaching kindergartners about physics. So they had to break down their skills into some simplistic ideas, and then they added narration by inserting audio. So lots of fun things you can do with this. And by the way, if you're following along, there is a link if you want those Google Classroom cheat sheets. Those are available on Shake Up Learning. And of course, with Google Slides, like I said, you can just do so many things. And so this is a little animation that I created that shows really a simplistic version of a drag and drop activity that you can do in Google Slides. Of course, we're just counting apples and moving them from the tree to the basket, but this can be a more complex interactivity, links and adding information, labeling, sorting, counting, creating, all kinds of things. And again, if you click on that link, I have an entire video to walk you through how to create some of this. All right, we're moving on to our last characteristic, beyond the due date. And this one sounds really scary. I am not asking you to give students extra time. That's not what this is about. I want you to consider allowing students to continue the work that interests them beyond the final assessment of the assignment or task. If you've ever had a student who was so excited about what they were doing or creating in your class that they didn't want to turn it in, then you know what this one is all about. Thinking, learning, exploring shouldn't be stifled simply because it was time to turn it in. And because we have so many digital tools at our disposal, that most of our products are not physical anymore, that we don't actually have to have them turn it in order to assess it. We can still see it, we can still get the grade in our grade book, and we can still encourage students to continue working even after you've gotten your grade. Students can continue to learn, create, and grow in different directions. And again, just encouraging them to find their own interests and passions. And another side of going beyond the due date is really moving beyond that one and done and creating assignments that don't necessarily have a true end date. That they build and grow throughout the year. And student portfolios are another way to do that. And we can use online student portfolios to share student work and demonstrate progress over time. There are tons of different styles of portfolios, showcase portfolios, all kinds of things. Some recommended tools, Google Sites is my number one pick for student portfolios. Blogger is great for over 13 because it is a true blog and it does have that comment feature. And of course, you can go simple with Google Slides as well. So this is another example from Mike Muhammad. He has been doing portfolios with Google Sites for, 7 or 8 years now. And I've talked to him several times about it and how it's evolved over time. He does use the UDL framework, and these students create their own sites. They design it. They have their own learner profile in here. So they are not only expressing, but getting to know who they are as learners. And then they have certain requirements for every unit, and they have a page for every unit. So this shows what they do cumulatively throughout the year. So it's really powerful. I've seen these firsthand. These portfolios are awesome. If you click on this link, this will take you to Mike's guest post, and he even has some tutorials and things on how he sets up Google Sites. Okay, let's move into some real lesson examples. And just in case I forget to point this out, over the next few slides, you'll see in the top right-hand corner the color-coded characteristics, and you'll be able to see what characteristics are addressed in each lesson. And I want to specifically say that there is no perfect lesson plan. I'm not expecting you to do every single one of these things every single day and every single lesson. It's really about finding that balance. Some days we'll work on mindset. Some days we may have choice. Some days we may connect outside the classroom. There are a few exceptions that allow us to do all of these things. And usually they are pretty big long-term projects, something like Genius Hour that would allow you to do all of these at once. Here's our first example. This is called Innovating Play with Slides. This is from my buddy Christine Pinto and Jessica Toomey. So this is for littles. Christine and Jessica teach kindergarten. Christine is in California, Jessica is in New Jersey, and they collaborate. Their classes collaborate every single day. Kindergartners, one-to-one with Chromebooks, they know how to use them, and they collaborate and connect with other classrooms. So that alone is very powerful. This lesson you see here, which is linked, you can get the dynamic learning experience for each of these here. You can go to File, make a copy, and use these, adapt these for your own classroom, but they've shared kind of everything, every step by step with us. And this is a screenshot from their slides. The kids are reading City Kid, Country Kid, and they're learning about the 5 senses. So they've got a video, they're learning about smell, and then they're creating a postcard. Our next one is Fake Instagram with Google Slides. So this was created by Carly Black and inspired by Lisa Johnson, Tech Chef for You, who I mentioned earlier. And Lisa had shared her fake Instagram with me and with the Shake Up Learning audience on the podcast, but she had created hers in Keynote. And I knew, I said, somebody listening is going to create one for Slides, and Carly did it. And then Carly used it in her language arts classroom. And so this learning experience explains how she used the template to have her students using this fake Instagram template to sort of mimic the stories from Instagram. So something students are familiar with, but of course, we don't have the risks that we necessarily have, or maybe we don't have the age problem that we have with access to things like Instagram, but they kind of get that feeling of it. Blogging or Vlogging with Google Classroom by Laura Steinbrink. So Laura shared this with me, and this is really her unique way of setting up Google Classroom to have students continue to blog or vlog, which is video blog, on a regular basis, and to give each other feedback. So if you look at this screenshot, you can see that she has used the topics as a way to give students their own space inside a class. Now, this is a separate class from the everyday class where their assignments appear. So she set this up. There's a topic with each student's name, and then they can post wherever their blog is. You know, they might be using Adobe Spark, they might be using Google Sites, they might be using YouTube, whatever it is, and then that they can post and comment and see that right there. This is from my buddy Tony Vincent from learninginhand.com. Y'all, Tony is just so artistic, and he has created this idea of shapegrams. And shapegrams uses Google Drawings to create all of these beautiful images. So Tony creates these, and students learn how to recreate them. So they learn all types of skills in Google Drawings, and they make all kinds of connections to seasons and content and different things that they're studying. Most of these are geared towards the younger grades, maybe hitting 6th or 7th grade is probably the top level. Now, he does have some ideas and things, of course, shared in his experience. Every single one of these, I have a linked Google Doc with the details on the lesson plan. And then our last lesson, yes, it does hit on all 5, but it is very unique. This is called Your Community in 360 with Maps, and this is from Jessica Brogley. So Jessica's students used a 360 camera, meaning a camera that takes 360-degree photos, and they learned about their community. They learned about the historical sites, and they documented this and put this into Google Street View so that other people could actually tour their community. So they learned all kinds of skills and learned about their community at the same time. It was really just kind of a powerful thing. Now, if you're not familiar with 360 cameras, they are much cheaper than they used to be and much more accessible. You may even have access to one at your campus or in your district that you could check out. but they are really cool, and you can explore and take this like virtual tour of different places like you can in Street View, but you could create your own. So I think that's a really fun activity. All right, I'm going to wrap things up and talk about a couple of bonus materials that the All Access Pass users will find. I will have a PDF of the Dynamic Learning Framework in those bonus materials for you, as well as the Blended Learning with Google toolkit that's going to have kind of like a cheat sheet to my book that you can get right there. Now, if you don't have the All Access Pass, you may be missing out, y'all. They're going to have access to all of these conference sessions for as long as they have their pass. So at least a full year. There's more than 70 hours of professional development and more added each week. You can get credit for all of these things. It includes all of my master classes, all of the workshops. You can get credit for listening to the podcast. We've got the conference bonus material, and it's going to include any future master classes and workshops that are added. We've got a members-only library of ebooks and cheat sheets. Y'all, this is just a huge, huge package. So if you're interested, click that link. We even have special pricing for groups and for schools. And if you haven't met the team yet, be sure to check out the sessions from the Shake Up Learning team. And if you would like to work with us, you can visit this link, and the link will be below the slides as well, and let us know how we can help you and your organization. So we would love to work with you. And y'all, this team is just something that I am so proud of. They are so awesome. So just remember, when it comes to dynamic blended learning, to start small. Just think of one lesson where you could go beyond. It's not about redoing everything that you have. We have tons of supporting resources for you on shakeuplearning.com. You can find the books at shakeuplearningbooks.com. If you want to dig in specifically to blended learning with Google, go to blendedlearningwithgoogle.com. But there are tons of resources, even if you don't have a copy of the book yet and really want to dig a little bit deeper. I hope you have enjoyed this session. Here's a link in case you missed it or you haven't clicked on it yet. And there is a link on this last slide if you would like to leave me some feedback. I would love to hear from you and what you think of the conference. But I hope you enjoyed this session, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, y'all.